It was late, that quiet kind of late where even the streetlights hum like they're tired. I was sitting on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea, half watching the news, half scrolling through my phone when I saw it, a voice message from my daughter, Jasmine. Now, Jasmine doesn't usually send voice messages. She's one of those texters who replies with emojis and short phrases. Okay, sure, got it. So when I saw her name pop up with that little play icon beside it, I smiled without thinking. My daughter, my only child, I pressed play. At first, I heard laughter, her laugh light and familiar like sunshine through blinds. Then another voice, her husband, Malik. He said something muffled, and Jasmine giggled again, then her voice sharpened. I swear I can't take her anymore, Malik. The way she talks, the way she acts, like she's some saint just because she raised me alone. Please, I'm grown. I don't need her pity or her advice, I blinked. The warmth drained out of me like someone had opened a window in winter. Malik chuckled. She means well, babe. Oh, I know she does, Jasmine said, her tone dipping into mock sweetness. But she's old-fashioned and she just lingers. Every time I see her, I feel trapped in that house again. That smell of pine sol, that same old gospel music. I can't breathe in there. I froze. Then she said it. The sentence that would change everything. Don't worry, babe. Once she's gone, the house is ours. Silence. Then laughter. Their laughter. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the floor, the glow from my phone washing over my hands. Gone hours. I replayed it. Once, twice, a third time, because I couldn't believe the words I was hearing. Every syllable carved deeper into me until I felt hollow, my Jasmine. My baby who used to sleep on my chest when she was scared of thunder. The girl I walked to school in the rain. The one I worked double shifts for so she'd never have to go without. I thought I'd misheard her. I wanted to believe it was about someone else. A landlord, a neighbor, anyone. But then I caught the way she said, that house. The same house my husband built with his own 2 hands before cancer took him. The same house Jasmine grew up in. I held the phone tighter. My tea had gone cold. The laughter in the recording was still ringing in my ears when I whispered, "Oh, baby girl." What have you done? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the one with the scratch she made when she was 10, carving her name with a fork. I used to love that little mark. It reminded me she'd always be part of this home. Now I looked at it and saw something else, the beginning of a goodbye I hadn't chosen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the clock seemed hesitant to tick. Every shadow on the wall felt like a memory. The birthday parties, the scraped knees, the late-night talks about boys and dreams. All of it echoing around me like ghosts. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through our old texts. Love you, Mom. Thanks for dinner. You're the best. They read like love letters from another lifetime. Around 2 a.m., I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and still. The moonlight poured over the yard. The same yard where Jasmine had learned to ride her bike, where I'd planted roses for my husband after his funeral. I could almost hear his voice. You did good, Clara. You raised her right. Had I, though? I used to think love meant giving everything. Every hour, every dollar, every ounce of patience. But sitting there under that pale moon, I realized something. Sometimes love becomes a leash. And sometimes the people you raise use that leash to pull you where they want you, until you forget you can walk away. When dawn crept in, soft and gray, I made myself a cup of coffee I couldn't taste. The decision came quietly, like a whisper I'd been ignoring for years. I folded a few clothes into a small suitcase. Just the essentials: jeans, my church shoes, the framed photo of my husband, and the notebook where I'd written down every bill, every loan, every dream. I placed my keys on the counter. My house keys. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at them. Then I took one deep breath and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a woman broken. It was the smile of someone finally seeing things clearly, because I wasn't leaving out of weakness. I was leaving to make space for something Jasmine and Malik never saw coming. As I locked the door behind me, I looked up at the sky, washed pink by morning light. I hope you sleep well, baby, I whispered. Because when you wake up, everything changes. When I was younger, I used to tell myself that being a mother meant never letting your child see you tired. No matter how long the shift, no matter how heavy the world felt, I'd come home with a smile, something hot on the stove, and a prayer in my heart. That's how I raised Jasmine, on faith, sacrifice, and leftovers that somehow always stretched. Her father, Daniel, was the steady kind. The kind of man who'd fix the neighbor's fence without being asked and still have energy to dance with his daughter in the living room afterward. He used to call her Sunshine, and Lord, she was. When he died, she was only 14. I remember the way she sat in the front pew at his funeral, her small hands gripping mine so tight my fingers went numb. I thought grief had welded us together forever that day. I thought we'd always protect each other, but time has a way of wearing down even the strongest promises. The years after Daniel passed were hard. I worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, came home to laundry and bills that didn't care how tired I was. But Jasmine was my reason. Every night when she was asleep, I'd stand by her door and whisper, "We're gonna be okay, baby. I promise." And for a long time we were. She grew into a bright young woman, confident, stylish, always the center of attention. She went to college on a scholarship, called me every Sunday at first. "Mama, I made the dean's list." "Mama, you'd love my dorm. It smells like coffee and ambition." I'd laugh, proud and grateful. She was everything I'd hoped she'd become. Then slowly, the calls got shorter. The mama became mom. Then sometimes just hey. I told myself it was independence. That's what we raised them for, right? To need us less? But needing less isn't the same as loving less. I first met Malik at Jasmine's graduation. He had a smooth voice and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The kind of man who seemed polite, but was always watching the room. Jasmine couldn't stop holding his hand, introducing him to everyone like she'd just discovered gold. When he shook my hand, his grip was just a little too firm. "It's an honor, Mrs. Walker," he said. "I've heard so much about you." I smiled back, but something about him made the hairs on my arm stand up. Maybe it was the way he looked at Jasmine, not with love, but with possession. Still, I wanted to be supportive. I'd been alone for years. Who was I to judge her choice in love? So when they got married 2 years later, I helped plan the whole thing, cooked half the food myself. The night before the wedding, Jasmine hugged me and whispered, "You've done enough, Mama. You can finally rest." Those words used to sound like love. Now, when I think back, they sound like the closing of a door. After the wedding, everything started to shift. At first, it was little things. She stopped visiting as often, said she was too busy. When I'd call, she'd let it ring and text me later. "Sorry, Mom, we were out." I didn't push. I told myself every mother has to step back eventually. Then came the comments, the little jabs wrapped in smiles. "Mom, maybe you should let us handle the bills. It's complicated now. Mom, don't you think it's time to declutter the house?" You hold on to everything. The last one stung the most. Because that house wasn't clutter. It was memory. Every photo frame, every chair, every scratch on the floor held a story. But Jasmine was changing. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Malik started coming around more, offering help with repairs that didn't need doing. He'd walk through the rooms like he was taking inventory. "This place could be worth a lot, Mrs. Walker," he'd say, tapping the walls like he was already thinking of where he'd hang his own pictures. Something inside me tightened each time. One Sunday, I made dinner for them. Roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread. Jasmine walked in wearing heels and perfume, like she was going to a gala, not her mama's table. She looked around the dining room and sighed. "Mom, you really should modernize. All this old stuff, it's heavy." "Baby, this old stuff is what raised you," I said softly. She rolled her eyes and laughed. Malik joined her. That laughter, sharp, careless. It was the same sound I'd hear again months later in that voice message. I didn't know it then. But that dinner was the first crack in the wall between us. I cleared the table in silence that night, listening to them whisper on the porch. Malik said something about timing. Jasmine said, "She'll give in. She always does." I stood at the sink, my hands in soapy water, and for the first time in years, I prayed not for her success, but for strength. Strength to face whatever was coming. Looking back, I see it now. The slow unraveling. The way love can turn into convenience. The way gratitude fades when people start measuring your worth in square footage instead of sacrifice. She stopped being my daughter in those small, silent moments, long before that voice message ever came. I just didn't want to see it. It's strange how betrayal doesn't come crashing down like thunder. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or warnings. It seeps in, slow, steady, like water through a cracked roof. You don't notice the damage until one morning everything feels damp. That's how it was with Jasmine and Malik. At first I told myself they were just busy. Young people have their own lives, their own rhythms. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who clings, who calls too much, who guilt-trips her children into visits. I'd raised Jasmine to stand on her own, even if it meant I'd be standing alone sometimes. But little by little, I started to feel like a guest in my own family. It began with birthdays. That year, Jasmine's birthday dinner wasn't at home. She chose a restaurant downtown, one of those modern places where the lights are dim and the food comes out looking like art instead of supper. When I walked in, Malik gave me a polite nod, but didn't stand. Jasmine barely looked up from her phone. "Mom," she said, finally noticing me, "you look nice." Nice, that was it. Not beautiful, not, "You look great," just nice. I sat down beside them, trying to ignore the sideways looks from the waiter who seemed unsure whether I was part of their table or lost. The conversation floated around money, work trips, and investments. I didn't understand half of it, and no one tried to explain. When the bill came, I reached for my purse. Old habits die hard, but Malik stopped me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's fine, Mrs. Walker," he said. "We got it. Your money's no good here." The way he said "your money" made me feel small, like I was a charity case instead of a mother who once paid their rent when they couldn't. After that, family dinners became fewer. Jasmine stopped bringing Malik around for Sunday meals, saying things like, "We're watching our carbs," or "We'll stop by next time." Next time never came. The only time they did show up was Thanksgiving. I spent 2 days preparing. Turkey, cornbread dressing, sweet potato pie. The house smelled like memory. When they walked in, Jasmine barely glanced at the spread. "Mom," she said, "you didn't have to do all this. We're actually trying something new this year. A lighter menu." I smiled tightly. "Oh, so you'll eat after?" She shrugged. "We brought our own dishes. Quinoa salad and something Malik made." "What was it, babe?" He smirked. "Pumpkin risotto." I looked at the table I'd spent hours setting. My grandmother's china, the gold-edged plates. For a moment, I felt foolish, like a woman playing hostess at a party no one wanted to attend. When the rest of the family arrived, cousins, neighbors, old friends, Jasmine's tone shifted. Suddenly she was warm, laughing too loud, calling me Mama again in that practiced, public way. But I saw it. The tightness in her jaw whenever I spoke, the way she corrected me in front of others. When I mentioned Daniel, her father, she interrupted, saying, "Let's not get emotional, Mom. Not everyone wants to hear about the past." The room went silent. Even the children stopped passing the rolls. I swallowed the hurt, smiled, and excused myself to the kitchen. I could still hear their laughter through the doorway, her laughter blending with Malik's low voice. I leaned against the counter and stared at the turkey. For the first time, it didn't smell like home. It smelled like the end of something. The real break came a few weeks later. Jasmine stopped by unannounced, looking around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. "Mom," she said, "we've been thinking, maybe it's time you moved in with us." I laughed softly. "Moved in? Why would I do that?" She hesitated. "You're alone here. That's a lot for one person to handle." Malik stepped in, his hands in his pockets. "It's just practical. Houses need upkeep. Taxes pile up. It's easier if it's in our name. You'd still live with us. Nothing would really change." There it was. In our name. I felt my heart skip. "You want me to sign over the house?" Jasmine's eyes flickered, but she forced a smile. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just paperwork." I stared at her, at my daughter, who used to braid my hair and fall asleep on my lap. And for the first time, I didn't recognize her. The girl I raised would have never looked at me that way. Calculating, rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else wrote. I told them I'd think about it, though my stomach twisted at the thought. That night, I overheard them talking on the porch. Jasmine's voice was low, anxious. "She's not ready yet," Malik replied, calm and confident. "She will be. She always folds when she feels guilty." I stood in the hallway, hand over my mouth, the air thick with disbelief. They thought I'd fold. They thought I'd let guilt undo me. They forgot. I built this life from nothing. I carried them through storms they'll never understand. And one day, they'd remember exactly who taught them how to stand. There's a certain kind of silence that only comes when people you love start plotting around you. It's not loud, it's careful, measured, like the sound of footsteps on old wood, hoping you won't notice. That's how it was in the months that followed. Jasmine and Malik visited more often, but it didn't feel like family anymore. It felt like business. Malik would walk through each room, running his hand along the door frames, looking up at the ceilings, testing the windows. He wasn't admiring my home. He was evaluating it. "This place is solid," he said one afternoon, pacing through the hallway. "Your husband really built it to last." He turned to me with a smile. "You must be proud, Mrs. Walker. This house could fetch a lot these days." I smiled politely, but my heart dropped into my stomach. Proud? Yes, but what I heard was valuable. One evening, Jasmine came by with a folder tucked under her arm. She kissed my cheek and sat down at the table where I'd set out her favorite peach cobbler. "Mom," she started gently, "Malik and I were talking, and we think it's time to get ahead of things, you know." "Financially. Get ahead of what, baby?" I asked. "Well, the house," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "If something ever happened to you, it would just make everything easier if it was already in my name." No messy probate, no confusion. She said it so sweetly, like she was doing me a favor. I didn't open the folder. I just looked at her. "You think something's going to happen to me?" Her eyes darted away. "Of course not, Mama. I'm just being practical." I murmured. "And when did being practical start sounding like taking things that aren't yours?" Her face tightened. "Mama, it's not taking. It's family. You raised me to be responsible, didn't you?" I sat back in my chair. The air between us shifted, heavy now, weighted with all the things we weren't saying. "Responsible," I said slowly. "I also raised you to know what's sacred." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she forced a laugh, stood up, and said she'd come back when I was in a better mood. The folder stayed on the table long after she left, staring at me like a stranger's eyes. That night, I pulled it open. Inside was a property transfer document, blank spaces neatly waiting for my signature. Malik's handwriting in the margins, their names typed where mine should be. I sat there in the dark, staring at the papers, feeling something cold settle deep inside me. My husband, Daniel, had poured his soul into this house. He laid the bricks himself on weekends after his shifts, humming gospel hymns under his breath. I'd painted the walls, raised our daughter here, buried my grief, and rebuilt my faith under this roof. And now, my child, the one I'd fed, clothed, and prayed over, wanted to erase me from it. Over the next few weeks, the pressure grew. Jasmine would call, her tone sugary at first. "Hey, Mama, did you get a chance to look over those papers?" I'd tell her I was thinking. She'd laugh softly. "Don't overthink it. Malik's already talked to a notary friend." When I didn't budge, her patience wore thin. "Mom, you're being stubborn," she snapped one evening. "You always do this, make everything emotional." "It's just paperwork." "Then why are you pushing it so hard?" I asked quietly. She didn't have an answer for that. Just a long, cold silence before she hung up. A week later, I came home from church to find Malik fixing the front step. "Thought I'd help out," he said, with that rehearsed grin. "You don't want to trip on this old porch." He'd brought new tools. A tape measure, even took pictures of the exterior. "Malik," I said. Crossing my arms, Are you fixing the step or appraising the place? He chuckled. Can't a son-in-law lend a hand? I wanted to believe that. God knows I did. But his eyes told a different story. The eyes of a man planning ahead for something that didn't belong to him yet. When he left, I sat on that same porch, the boards creaking beneath me, and prayed for guidance. I prayed for my husband's voice, for wisdom, for strength, and somewhere deep inside, I heard it, faint but firm. Clara, you've been quiet long enough. That night, I called my old friend Thomas, who'd been Daniel's lawyer back in the day. Thomas, I said, I need to ask you something about property law. His tone sharpened immediately. You okay, Clara? I'm fine, I said softly. Just wondering. If someone wanted to transfer ownership of their house, what would they need to do? He explained the process, slow and detailed. Then he paused. Clara, you're not thinking of signing anything, are you? I smiled to myself. No, Thomas. I'm thinking of something else. That night, I opened my old safe, the one Daniel had built into the closet floor. Inside was every important paper we'd ever owned. The deed, insurance, marriage certificate. I held that deed like it was a living thing. My name. My husband's name, no one else's. And right then, I knew they'd never touch it. But I also knew something else. I couldn't just protect what was mine. I had to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. I used to think that heartbreak came all at once, like a wave that crashes and drags you under. But it doesn't. It drips, slowly. It starts with a laugh that sounds wrong, a silence that lasts too long, a word that lands heavier than it should. And then one night, you hear something that breaks you clean in two. It had been a long week. I'd been helping at church, sorting food donations, trying to keep busy. Anything to quiet the unease that had taken root in my chest since that conversation about the house. That evening, I came home, made myself a cup of chamomile, and sat down at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed with a message from Jasmine. Hey, Mom, just wanted to check on you. Love you. It felt normal, familiar. I smiled, relieved. Maybe she was softening. Maybe I'd overreacted. Then another notification appeared, a voice message. I pressed play without hesitation. At first, I thought it was another one of her accidental pocket recordings. But then I heard her voice, clear as day, sharper now, laughing in that way she did when she thought she was being clever. Malik, I can't believe she's still holding out. She acts like she's protecting some sacred land. It's a house, not a temple, he laughed too. Give it time. She'll cave. She always caves. Oh, I know, Jasmine said, her voice softening, the way it used to when she was trying to convince me of something. She'll feel guilty eventually. That's her weakness. Always trying to be the good mom, the selfless one. There was a pause, then that cruel, careless laugh again. She won't understand. She's never had money. Those words weren't whispered. They were tossed, light as air, across the room like crumbs to pigeons, and when the laughter followed, sharp, polite, rehearsed, something inside me cracked so quietly that no one but me could hear it. I sat there for a long time. The sound of my own breathing felt foreign, too loud. The clock ticked. The tea went cold. I replayed the message, once, twice, a third time. Every word landed heavier. My daughter, my Jasmine, speaking about me like I was a nuisance. A joke, a stepping stone to her comfort. She wasn't even angry. That would have hurt less. She was amused, detached, and it hit me. She didn't just stop loving me. She'd started looking down on me. I turned off the phone, my hands trembling, and looked around the house. My house. The walls, the photos, the couch where she'd once fallen asleep watching cartoons. Everything seemed to hum with memory. There was a photo on the mantel, her first day of kindergarten. Her smile was so wide her eyes disappeared into little crescents. I'd ironed that dress 3 times the night before just to make sure it was perfect. Now I stared at that same photo and felt a cold. Distance between that little girl and the woman who'd just said those words. I didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, something inside me went still, like water freezing over, because I realized love wasn't enough to save this anymore. I'd spent my whole life forgiving, explaining, making excuses. But forgiveness doesn't fix what someone enjoys breaking. Around midnight, I went into my bedroom and pulled out a small box from under the bed. Inside were letters Daniel had written me before he passed, words I'd almost forgotten. I unfolded one and read, "If life ever turns you bitter, Clara, let that bitterness be direction. Don't let it drown you. Let it move you where you need to go." I read that line 3 times, then whispered, "I hear you, Daniel." I wasn't bitter. Not yet, but I was awake. At dawn, I stood by the window and watched the sunlight creep across the floor. The world outside looked the same, quiet, steady, but everything inside me had changed. I knew then that if I stayed, they'd destroy me slowly. With smiles and sweet words and signatures on just paperwork. So I made a plan, simple, silent and sure. By morning, I'd be gone. Not because I was running away, but because I needed space to become something they didn't expect, a woman who wasn't their safety net anymore, a mother who finally stopped protecting those who mistook her love for weakness. I packed a single suitcase, jeans, blouses, my husband's photograph, and the old Bible he gave me. I left the phone on the table beside the empty cup, screen glowing with Jasmine's last message, "Love you." I looked at it for a long moment, then turned it face down. Before leaving, I walked through every room one last time. My hand brushed over the wall where Jasmine's height marks were still carved in pencil. "Age 8, age 10, age 13, I whispered. "You used to reach higher." Then I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The morning air was crisp, almost cleansing. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because I'd left my home, but because I'd left behind the part of me that kept waiting to be loved back. I left before sunrise. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. The same kind of silence they gave me when they laughed behind my back. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want tears. I wanted clarity. And the only way to get that was to walk away before anyone realized what I was doing. I'd spent most of my life taking care of people. Daniel, Jasmine, church families, neighbors, even strangers. But that morning, for the first time, I did something purely for me. I took the house keys off my chain, laid them neatly on the kitchen counter, and whispered to the empty room, "Take care of her, Daniel." Just for a little while longer. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked out. The air was cool and still, that soft gray just before dawn. The world felt untouched, like it hadn't yet decided whether it wanted to be cruel or kind. I loaded my bag into the back of my old car and sat for a minute, hands on the wheel, staring at the house in the rearview mirror. That house had been everything. Our dream. Our foundation, the proof that love and hard work could build something lasting. I'd imagined growing old in that living room, rocking my grandbabies on that porch swing. Now I was driving away from it, not because I'd lost it, but because I refused to let it define me anymore. By the time Jasmine woke up, I was halfway across town. She called 3 times, then once more. Then a text. "Mom, where are you? I came by and the door's unlocked. Are you okay?" I ignored it, not out of spite, out of peace. Then came another message. "Mom, you can't just disappear like this. Malik said you're being dramatic. Please call me dramatic." That word almost made me laugh, because if they thought I was dramatic now, they hadn't seen what I was capable of when I was calm. I rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. The kind of place where no one asks questions. The landlord, a retired man named Mr. Keene, handed me the keys and said, "It's not much, but it's peaceful." I smiled. Peaceful sounds just right. That night, I sat by the small window overlooking the street. The city hum below was different from the hush of my old neighborhood. It was alive, and for the first time in years, so was I. I didn't cry. Not once. The tears had already done their work. What was left was purpose. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my notebook, the same one where I'd written every bill, grocery list, and prayer over the years. I turned to a blank page and wrote in careful, steady handwriting, my plan. Secure everything legally. Call Thomas, lawyer. Verify property ownership, title, and any pending claims. Protect deed and assets. Disappear. Quietly. Change mailing address. Remove Jasmine's name as emergency contact. Close joint accounts she had access. To observe. Don't react. Let them reveal themselves without interference. Let their desperation do the talking. Prepare for the final move. When I put the pen down, my hands were steady. It wasn't revenge I was after. Not at first. It was clarity. But clarity has a way of sharpening into something else when you've been disrespected too long. That evening, I went to the bank and sat with the branch manager, a young woman named Celeste with kind eyes and perfect nails. Mrs. Walker, it looks like you're the sole owner of your accounts, she said, scanning the screen. Would you like to add anyone? No, I said. I'd like to remove someone, permanently, Celeste smiled. Of course. By the time I walked out of that building, my finances were sealed tighter than a vault. No daughter, no son-in-law, no access. Days passed. Jasmine kept calling. The tone of her messages changed, first concerned, then annoyed, then almost angry. Mom, I don't understand why you're acting like this. You're scaring me. Malik says you're making things harder than they need to be. That one made me laugh, soft and humorless. Making things harder? No, I was just making them clearer. 2 weeks later, I ran into an old friend from church, Denise, at the grocery store. Clara. Lord, where have you been? Everyone's asking about you, I smiled. Just taking some time for myself. She lowered her voice. Your daughter came by the church last Sunday, said she's worried. She mentioned something about the house. You okay? I nodded slowly. Better than I've been in years. Denise studied me a moment and smiled knowingly. You're doing something, aren't you? I chuckled. Let's just say I'm letting God handle the details, but I'm signing the paperwork. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker like small, living stars. I thought about all the years I'd poured into being needed, how I'd mistaken that for being loved. It was a humbling truth, realizing that the people you raise can grow into strangers. But it was also freeing. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat in that kitchen replaying that cruel message. That woman had been wounded, blindsided, still hoping for decency. This woman, the one sipping coffee under the hum of city traffic, was awake, and she had a plan. When you've spent your whole life keeping things together, there's a strange peace that comes with finally letting them fall apart, just to see what survives. For me, what survived was purpose. The kind that doesn't need noise or applause, the quiet kind that builds in the dark. The first step was clarity. I called Thomas, my husband's old lawyer, the same one who'd helped us finalize the deed decades ago. He picked up on the second ring. Clara, it's been a while? It has, I said softly. I need your help again, but this time, I need it to be discreet. He must have heard something in my tone because his voice turned serious. Tell me everything. I told him about the house, about Jasmine and Malik, about the voice message that cracked something open inside me. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment before saying, You know, Daniel once told me you were the strongest woman he'd ever known. I smiled, swallowing the lump in my throat. Well, I'm about to prove him right. Within a week, we'd gone through every document. The title, the insurance, the will, all of it still under my name, untouched. Thomas updated the will, sealing it with precision. Your assets are now protected, he said. No one can touch that house without your consent. Not your daughter, not her husband, not anyone. Good, I said, my voice steady. But I'm not done yet. After the legal dust settled, I started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. At first, I went just to fill the silence, to be around voices that didn't lie or judge. But soon, I realized I was drawn there for another reason. The women I met had stories, hard ones. A woman named Lila, whose son stopped speaking to her after she refused to sell her land. A grandmother named May, who'd been tricked out of her home by her own nephew. Every story sounded too familiar. Each one chipped away at my self-pity and replaced it with fire, because I saw it clearly now. This wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who'd been told she was too old, too emotional, too trusting. So I started sharing what I knew. I'd sit with them over coffee and say, "Get your paperwork in order. Don't sign anything without a witness. And for heaven's sake, don't let anyone make you feel guilty for owning something you earned." Word spread fast. Within a month, women started calling me Miss Clara, coming by for advice, asking for help with deeds and wills, and I helped them, quietly, efficiently, with a strength that surprised even me. It was like I'd found a new purpose in the ashes of betrayal. Meanwhile, Jasmine kept calling. Her messages had shifted again, from confusion to irritation, then, slowly, to panic. "Mom, we need to talk. Malik's getting worried. Mom, you can't just ignore us. This isn't healthy. Mom, please, just tell me where you are. There was one I saved, not because it hurt, but because it told me everything I needed to know. If you're trying to punish me, it's not going to work. You're being selfish. Dad would never want you to act like this. Selfish." After everything I'd given, that's the word she chose. I deleted the message, then turned my phone off for a full week. The next time I spoke to Thomas, I told him I wanted to sell the house. "Are you sure, Clara?" he asked. "You've lived there over 30 years. "I'm sure," I said. "It's time to let that house go before it becomes their weapon." He nodded. "Then I'll make sure it goes to someone who values it." I smiled. "Oh, I already know who it's going to." 2 weeks later, I met the buyer, a kind woman in her early 40s named Denise, who ran a small community daycare. When she stepped into the living room, she gasped. "This house feels alive," I nodded. "It's got a good heart. Just needs someone who'll listen to it." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I will." And in that moment, I knew Daniel would have approved. When the deal was finalized, I didn't tell Jasmine. I didn't owe her that. Instead, I waited, because I knew exactly how this kind of silence would eat at her. She'd call. She'd visit. She'd demand answers. But the next time she set foot in that house, she wouldn't be walking into her inheritance. She'd be walking into her wake-up call. That night, I returned to the shelter after signing the final papers. The women gathered around me like family. "Miss Clara," one of them said, "you're glowing. Something happen?" I laughed softly. "Just finished something I should have done a long time ago." "What's that?" "Stopped mistaking guilt for love." As I left that night, a light rain began to fall. I stood under the street lamp for a moment, feeling the cool drops on my skin. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel burdened by memories. I felt powerful. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a grieving mother or a broken woman. I was the architect of my own redemption. You can tell when someone starts to panic, not by what they say, but by what they repeat. And Jasmine repeated the same thing over and over. "Mom, please call me." At first, her messages came polite, almost rehearsed, the kind meant to sound like concern. "Hey, Mom, just checking on you. Malik and I miss you." Then a few days later, "Mom, I know you're upset, but we can fix this. Let's talk." But silence has a way of changing people. When I didn't answer, the tone shifted. "You're being cruel. You've never acted like this before. Why are you doing this to us?" To us, not to her, to them. It told me everything I needed to know. I sat in my little apartment one evening, phone buzzing on the counter while I folded laundry. The city outside hummed with its usual rhythm, cars, laughter, life moving on, and it felt good to be part of it again. I'd spent decades in that house waiting for something, forgiveness, peace, a reason to stop apologizing for wanting boundaries. Now, in this tiny space, I didn't have to wait anymore, but I knew this calm wouldn't last long. Jasmine and Malik weren't the kind to accept silence without trying to fill it with noise. Sure enough, a week later, Malik showed up at my church. I was helping in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, when I heard a familiar voice behind me, Mrs. Walker. I turned, and there he was, and standing in the doorway, wearing that same tailored smile that had fooled me for years. "Well, if it isn't my favorite son-in-law," I said, keeping my voice calm even. He looked uncomfortable. "You've been hard to reach. Jasmine's worried." "I'm sure she is," I said. "People usually worry when they lose something they thought they owned." His eyes flickered. Just for a second, the charm slipped. Then he laughed softly. "You've misunderstood. We just want to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I said, turning back to the pot. "Better than I've been in years." He hesitated, then asked, "Did you do something with the house?" That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't turn around. I just stirred the soup slowly and said, "You'll find out soon enough." By the time he left, the kitchen volunteers were staring after him like he was a ghost who'd walked into the wrong story. One of them, a woman named Gloria, chuckled and said, "Miss Clara, you handle that man like a sermon," I smiled. "Sometimes, child, silence is a sermon." That night, I finally decided to give Jasmine what she wanted. A meeting. I called her, my voice steady. "Meet me at the cafe on Main Street tomorrow at noon." She sounded relieved. "Oh, thank God." "Mom, just come," I said. "No, Malik, just you." A pause. "Okay, Mom, just me." The next day, I got there early. I sat near the window, the same kind of soft sunlight spilling in that used to fill our kitchen when she was little. I ordered tea and waited. When Jasmine walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, not in years, but in energy. Worn down by worry, maybe by guilt. "Mom," she said brightly, walking over like we'd just finished Sunday service. I smiled. "Jasmine." She sat across from me, smoothing her blazer, flashing that same smile I used to fall for when she wanted something. "You look good. Where have you been?" "Living," I said simply. She laughed, but it didn't sound real. "You scared me, Mom. You just vanished." Malik and I thought maybe something happened. "Something did happen," I said quietly. "I finally started listening," she frowned. "Listening to what?" "To the truth." Her hands tightened around her cup. "Mom, I know you're angry, but you're being unfair. That message you heard, it wasn't serious. You know how people talk. We were just joking." "Joking," I repeated. "So when you said, 'Once she's gone, the house is ours,' that was just humor?" Her face froze. The waitress came by to refill our cups, breaking the tension for a moment. I thanked her, then looked back at Jasmine, who was fidgeting with her napkin. "Mom, please." "We were stressed. Malik was talking about investments and you thought your mother was one of them?" I asked, my voice low but calm. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked down. "You've always made everything about feelings, Mom. You can't take a joke." "No," I said. "I can't take betrayal dressed up as a joke." The color drained from her face. "Where's the house deed, Mom?" she finally asked, voice trembling with frustration. "Malek said he tried to check the property records and—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "You don't have to finish that sentence." I leaned forward, my eyes steady on hers. "The house isn't yours. It never was, and it never will be." Her mouth fell open. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's already gone, sold, signed, done." For a second, the world went quiet, just the sound of the cafe clock ticking between us. Then she whispered, "You sold it?" "Yes." "To who?" "A woman who'll love it, live in it, and never once call it a burden." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears, not the kind that come from heartbreak, but from disbelief, the kind that come when people realize their plan just turned to dust. "You had no right," she whispered. I smiled gently. "Oh, I had every right. I just stopped giving it away." She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. People turned to look, but I stayed seated, calm as a stone. "Mom, you don't understand what you've done," she hissed. That house was built on love," I said. "And you tried to turn it into leverage. So I gave it back to love." She shook her head, her voice cracking. "You've lost it," I smiled, sipping my tea. "No, baby. I finally found it. I thought that cafe meeting would be the end of it, that maybe, just maybe, Jasmine would finally understand the weight of her choices and find some humility in the silence that followed. But people like Malik don't take humiliation quietly. And Jasmine, well, she was always her father's daughter when it came to pride. It didn't take long for the next confrontation to come. 3 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I knew that rhythm. Sharp, impatient, like someone used to being obeyed. I didn't rush. I folded the dish towel in my hands, set it on the counter, and opened the door. There they stood, Jasmine, eyes red and furious, and Malik beside her, jaw tight. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Would you like to come in?" They brushed past me before I could finish. Jasmine paced the small living room, taking in the humble furniture, the single lamp, the framed picture of her father. "This is where you've been?" she said, almost disgusted. "You left everything for this?" I closed the door gently. "I didn't leave everything. I took what mattered." Malik folded his arms. "So it's true then? You sold the house?" "Yes," I said simply. "To who?" he asked sharply. "Someone who earned it," I replied. "Something you wouldn't understand." Jasmine threw her hands up. "You had no right. That was supposed to be my inheritance." I turned to her slowly. "Inheritance," I repeated. "You talk like I died, Jasmine." "I'm standing right here." She glared at me, tears of anger brimming. "You always twist things. You make me out to be the villain." Malik stepped forward. "Mrs. Walker, maybe you don't understand how much you've complicated things." "We made plans." "Ah," I interrupted. "You made plans." He hesitated. "That's the difference," I said softly. "You made plans around me. I made plans for me." For a moment, the room was quiet, except for Jasmine's uneven breathing. Then she said the words that sealed it all. "You've ruined our lives." I smiled sadly. "No, sweetheart. I just stopped funding them." Malik's mask cracked then. His polite tone vanished. "You think this is funny? You think you can just throw away everything and start over? You've humiliated us." "Humiliation requires innocence," I said, walking toward my phone on the coffee table. "And neither of you has that anymore." I picked it up, scrolled for a second, and pressed play. And then, that voice, Jasmine's voice. Cold, mocking. "Careless. She won't understand. She's never had money." The sound filled the room. Malik froze. Jasmine's face drained of color. "Don't worry, babe. Once she's gone, the house is ours." The laughter that followed sounded even uglier now. Bouncing off the bare walls of my small apartment, I let the message play in full, then pressed stop. The silence afterward was deafening. Jasmine's voice shook. "Mom, I didn't mean that." I looked her dead in the eye. "Yes, you did. You just didn't mean for me to hear it." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Malik was joking." "No," I said softly, cutting her off. "You were laughing." He was leading. "You followed, and now you're both standing here wondering how I beat you at your own game." Malik clenched his fists. "We were stressed. You were being unreasonable." "Unreasonable," I repeated with a bitter laugh. "You asked me to sign over my home. You plotted behind my back. And when I left, you thought you could shame me into coming back." I took a slow step forward. "Tell me, Malik, how's that working for you?" He looked away, jaw tightening. Jasmine reached for me suddenly, like a child again. "Mom, please." "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you'd want to help us start our life." I felt my throat tighten, because that voice, that pleading tone was still my baby's. For a split second, I saw the little girl who used to climb into my bed after nightmares. But then I remembered what she'd said. Once she's gone, the house is ours, and the sympathy vanished like smoke. "You didn't ask for help, Jasmine," I said quietly. "You planned for my absence." "There's a difference," she broke then, tears spilling freely, her hands trembling. Malik put a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. "Let's go," she said through gritted teeth. "This isn't my mother anymore," I smiled faintly. "No, baby, this is your mother. You just never took the time to know her." As they turned to leave, Malik stopped in the doorway. "You'll regret this," he said. "You're old, alone, and you just threw away the only family you had left." I met his gaze without flinching. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. And being alone is a lot better than being surrounded by liars," he sneered. But I could see the fear beneath it, the kind that comes when someone realizes the person they underestimated now holds all the power. When the door closed behind them, I stood there for a moment, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. Then, I pressed delete on the voice message, not out of forgiveness, but because I didn't need proof anymore. They knew what they'd done. And they knew I'd risen above it. That evening I went back to the shelter. The women gathered around as I shared the story, not as gossip, but as a lesson. Sometimes, I told them, You have to let people choke on the silence they created. Don't argue, don't explain, just take back your name and your peace. They nodded, their eyes shining with understanding, and I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd been made to feel small by those she'd loved too much. When people lose what they thought was guaranteed, they don't grieve quietly. They scramble. They call lawyers, family members, old friends, anyone who might tell them they still have a chance. And Jasmine and Malik were no exception. It started with a text from Jasmine a few days after that confrontation. "Mom, I spoke to a lawyer. He said if you sold the house without notifying next of kin, it could be challenged." I read it twice, then set my phone down and smiled. She still didn't get it. Next of kin. She thought this was about blood, but blood means nothing when it's poisoned by greed. A week later, Thomas called. He chuckled before he even said hello. "Clara, you stirred the whole hornet's nest. I just got off a call from some very desperate people." "Let me guess," I said. "My daughter and her husband?" "Bingo," he said. "They wanted to confirm the house sale. Said they were considering legal action." I sighed. "And what did you tell them?" "That they don't have a legal leg to stand on," he said, his voice full of amusement. "The property was fully in your name. No transfer, no claim, no joint tenancy. You sold it clean." "Good," I said softly. "But that's not the best part," he added. "When I told them the buyer was already moving in, you should have heard the silence on the line. I think Malik dropped the phone." I laughed, a deep, satisfied laugh that came from a place no bitterness could reach. 2 days later, Jasmine showed up again, this time without Malik. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup uneven, like she hadn't slept. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I opened the door halfway. "Do what, Jasmine?" "Sell our house," she snapped. "Our house?" I repeated. "I don't remember your name on the deed." She clenched her fists. "You don't understand, Malik." "Malik," I interrupted, "was the one who said, 'Once she's gone, the house is ours.'" "I understand perfectly." Her lip quivered. "He didn't mean it." "Oh, I believe he did. And I believe you did too." She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "You could have just waited, Mom. I would have inherited it one day anyway." I looked her straight in the eye. "And that's exactly why you didn't deserve it." Her eyes widened. "An inheritance isn't something you scheme for," I said quietly. "It's something you earn through love, respect, and patience. You wanted mine before I was even gone, so I made sure you could never touch it." She covered her mouth, tears streaming down. "I just thought you'd want me to have something of yours." I smiled gently. "You already do, Jasmine. You have my eyes, my stubbornness, and unfortunately my temper. But my home? That was built on honesty. And you lost your claim to that the moment you laughed." She sank down onto the step, crying. And for a moment, I almost reached for her. Almost. But mercy given too soon only teaches people how to wound you better next time. So I let her cry. When she finally looked up, I said, "Do you know what I did with the money?" She shook her head. "I started something new," I said. "A fund for women who've been pushed out of their homes by the people they trusted. A small way to make sure no one else loses what I almost did." She blinked at me in disbelief. "You gave it away?" "Not gave," I corrected softly. "Invested in strength." That same evening, Malik called. His tone was no longer charming. It was bitter, desperate. "You made a mistake, Mrs. Walker," he said. "You won't get away with this." "I already have," I replied. "You think you've won, but Jasmine's your daughter. You can't just cut her out." "I can," I said. "And I did." "She made her choice. So did you." He laughed darkly. "You'll die alone." "I'd rather die alone," I said, "than live surrounded by thieves." And then I hung up. Weeks passed. The chaos quieted. Jasmine stopped calling. Malik's number went straight to voicemail. I heard through the church gossip mill that his business had folded. Some bad investment he'd been warned against. When I heard that, I didn't celebrate. I just felt finished. Some endings don't need applause. They just need peace. One Saturday morning, I drove by my old street. The new owner, Denise, was planting flowers out front. Lavender and daisies, my favorites. She saw me and waved. "Miss Clara." You came back, I smiled. Just passing through. The house feels happy, she said, brushing soil from her gloves. Like it's been waiting for laughter again. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. Keep it that way. Driving home, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't healed me, but justice had. Justice. Not the courtroom kind, but the quiet, moral kind. The one where truth and peace finally take the same seat. That night, I wrote in my journal, you can't teach people gratitude, but you can remind them that nothing owed is guaranteed. I gave her life, love, and shelter. She gave me distance. I gave her silence. And in that silence, I found myself again. I closed the book and sat by the window, watching the streetlights shimmer across the wet pavement. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken, I was just free. The quiet after a storm feels different when you know you survived it on purpose. There's no fear, no trembling, just stillness, and the slow realization that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build, and that's exactly what I started doing. The women's shelter had become my second home by then. What started as a few hours of volunteering turned into full days of planning, mentoring, listening. The director, a kind woman named Evelyn, approached me one afternoon. Clara, she said, the way you talk to these women, you don't just give advice. You give them a reason to breathe again. I smiled. Maybe because I remember what it's like to forget how. She nodded thoughtfully. You should think about starting a program. Something with your name on it. The idea caught me off guard. My name? Why not? She said. You turned your pain into power. Other women can learn how to do the same. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her words, your name on it. So the next morning, I sat at my little kitchen table, opened my notebook again, and wrote Project Queen's Table. It would be a fund and mentorship program for older women starting over. Those abandoned by family, betrayed by loved ones, left to rebuild from ashes. Because I'd been all those things once. Within months, it began to take shape. The money from the house sale became seed funding. Thomas helped with the legal structure. Evelyn introduced me to people who could make it grow. We hosted small workshops, teaching women how to protect their assets, rebuild credit, and reclaim confidence. I watched them walk in with slumped shoulders and leave standing taller, their laughter louder, their eyes clearer. Every week, someone would tell me, Miss Clara, your story gave me courage. And every time, I'd smile and say, it's not my story, baby. It's ours. One evening, as I was locking up after a long day, a woman stopped me at the door. She looked young, maybe in her 30s, eyes tired but hopeful. You're Clara Walker, right? She asked. I nodded. She smiled nervously. My aunt told me about your program. Said you help women start fresh. That's right, I said gently. You looking to start? She hesitated. My husband left. Took the house, the car, everything. Said I didn't earn it. Something inside me stilled. What's your name, baby? Renee, she whispered. I reached for her hand. Renee, let me tell you something. You don't have to earn what you already built. You just have to claim it. She broke down crying right there, and I held her until the shaking stopped. Later, when she joined our group, she told the other women, Miss Clara didn't just help me get my life back. She reminded me it was mine all along. That night, I went home smiling, because helping her helped me too. But even as my new life bloomed, part of me still wondered about Jasmine. I hadn't heard from her in months. The last I'd seen were glimpses through church gossip. Malik's failed business, their mounting debts, the whispers of separation. At first, I tried to ignore it. I'd built my peace on distance, and I wasn't eager to trade it for pain again. But some nights, when I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I'd catch myself staring at the stars, wondering if she was looking at the same sky, realizing the weight of what she'd lost. I didn't want her to suffer. Not really. I just wanted her to understand. Because forgiveness without understanding is just permission to repeat the wound. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Jasmine's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. My hands shook, not from fear, but from memories. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Mom, I don't know where to start. Everything fell apart after you left. Malik's gone, the house is gone, and I'm working double shifts just to stay afloat. I hated you for a while. I thought you abandoned me. But then I realized you just stopped letting me use you as a crutch. I'm sorry for what I said, for every cruel thing. I was selfish and scared. If you ever want to see me again, I'll be at the old park this Sunday at 3. Jasmine. I read it 3 times. My first instinct was to cry, but the tears never came. Instead, I folded the letter neatly and set it on the counter. That Sunday, I showed up. She was sitting on the same bench where her father used to push her on the swings as a child. The sight of her, older, humbled, alone, hit me harder than I expected. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, eyes wet. Mom, I didn't speak. I just waited. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. For everything. For the house. For the words. For not being the daughter you deserved. I stepped closer, my heart heavy but soft. You can't undo the past, Jasmine. You can only stop dragging it around, she nodded, tears falling freely. Can we start over? I sighed. The kind of sigh that comes from a lifetime of holding too much. Then I said, we can try. But this time, we meet as women, not as a mother cleaning up her child's mess. She nodded again, understanding more than she ever had before. And for the first time in years, I hugged my daughter, not with the desperation of a mother afraid to lose her child, but with the peace of a woman who finally knew her worth. Peace has a strange way of revealing the truth. Once the noise quiets, once your heart finally stops aching, you start to see people for who they are, not who you needed them to be. After that day in the park, Jasmine and I spoke every so often. Nothing deep, just small, cautious steps, the kind people take when they're still walking over broken glass. But Malik? He didn't take it well. About a month later, Jasmine called. Her voice was small, almost childlike again. Mom, she said, Malik served me divorce papers. I stayed quiet, letting her speak. He's blaming me for everything, she continued. The house, the money, his business, everything. Says I ruined him. I let out a slow breath. No, Jasmine. He ruined himself. You just stood too close when it happened. She started to cry softly. I didn't know, Mom. I really didn't. He told me we'd build something together. He made it sound like I owed him my loyalty. Even when he lied, I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger toward her. Just pity. You were looking for love, baby, I said gently, and you mistook control for care. I know that kind of love. It looks shiny until it burns, she sniffled. You were right about him. I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. No, Jasmine, I was just quiet long enough for you to hear yourself. In the months that followed, things fell apart for her. Malik filed for bankruptcy, then skipped town. Rumor had it he'd been caught in some shady investments, owing people money he didn't have. Jasmine was left with nothing. No house, no savings, no husband, just the consequences of choices she'd once called practical. But sometimes losing everything is the only way to remember who you are. She took a small apartment across town, started working at a dental clinic, and kept her head down. Occasionally, she'd drop by the shelter. Not as a volunteer, not as a client, just to sit and listen to the women. One day, I walked in and found her folding donated clothes beside Renee, the young woman I'd helped months earlier. For a moment, neither of them saw me. I just watched, the way Jasmine listened when Renee spoke about her struggles, the gentleness in her movements. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of the girl I'd raised, not the one who wanted to take, but the one who used to give. When she finally noticed me, she smiled shyly. Hey, Mom. I walked over, handed her a stack of blankets, and said, Good to see you helping. She shrugged softly. Feels right, I nodded. It usually does. After that, she came by often. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't full of resentment anymore. It was full of understanding. One afternoon, we sat together outside the shelter, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. Do you ever miss the house? She asked quietly. I thought about it for a long moment. No, I said finally. The house was never the point. The people inside it were. She looked down. And I ruined that. I shook my head. You can't ruin something that's still being built. You can only learn not to break it again. Her eyes filled with tears. You really forgive me? I reached for her hand. Forgiveness isn't about you, baby. It's about me refusing to let your mistakes keep me bitter. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I want to do better, Mom. Then start by doing good, I said. Help people who remind you of who you used to be. Meanwhile, the world kept moving, and mine began to bloom again. Project Queen's Table grew faster than I expected. Women from all over the city came to share their stories, rebuild their lives, and learn from each other. We partnered with a local radio station, started a podcast called The Second Chapter, where women shared their stories of betrayal and renewal. And one day, when Jasmine asked if she could speak on the show, I said yes. Her episode aired on a Sunday morning. She spoke with trembling honesty. I hurt the one person who loved me unconditionally. I thought strength was control, but my mother showed me that strength is grace, and that grace is power. When I heard her voice over the radio, my eyes filled. Not with sorrow, but pride, because she was finally learning the language of growth. Later that week, she came by my apartment with a small box in her hands. I made something for you, she said shyly. Inside was a keychain. A tiny silver house charm hung from it, engraved with the words, "Home isn't a place. It's the woman who built it." My throat tightened. It's beautiful, she smiled through tears. I sold my wedding ring to buy it. I reached for her face, cupping her cheek. That was never your ring anyway, Jasmine, but this is yours. We hugged then, truly hugged, for the first time since before everything broke. They say time heals all wounds, but I've learned that's not true. Time doesn't heal, truth does. And sometimes, truth doesn't come with apologies or explanations. It comes with stillness, with the quiet acceptance that you survived what was meant to break you, and you came out wiser. That's what I carry now. Not bitterness, not pride, just truth. It's been almost a year since I walked out of that house. A year since the voice message that shattered my illusions and forced me to rebuild from the ground up. And somehow, through all the pain, I found my purpose waiting for me on the other side. Project Queen's Table is thriving. We've helped dozens of women, mothers, widows, divorcees reclaim their names, their homes, their worth. Some days, I just sit in the back of the room, listening as they share their stories. One woman stood up last week and said, "I thought I was too old to start again. Then Miss Clara showed me you're never too old to protect your peace." They applauded, and I smiled quietly. If only they knew I didn't save them. They saved me. Jasmine helps at the center now. She comes twice a week, teaches budgeting and life skills. The women love her. She's not the same woman she was when all this began. Her edges have softened, but her strength has grown in ways that make me proud. Sometimes she brings me flowers, sometimes dinner. Other times she just sits with me in silence, which somehow feels even better. One evening she looked over at me and said, "Mom, I still don't know how you forgave me." I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, "Because I had to, Jasmine. Forgiveness wasn't a gift to you. It was a promise to myself that I'd never carry hate where love used to live." She nodded slowly. "I hope one day I'm as strong as you," I smiled. "You already are. You just had to fall far enough to find your footing." Malik never resurfaced. Some say he left the state, some say he's trying to start over somewhere new. I don't wish him harm. In fact, I wish him lessons, the kind that come only when the mirror finally turns on you, because every snake eventually sheds its charm, and what's left is the truth of its skin. And as for me, I stopped looking back. The only time I glance behind me now is to see how far I've come. This morning, I drove out to the old neighborhood. Not for closure, just to visit. Denise was in the yard, pruning the rose bushes I'd planted decades ago. When she saw me, she waved me over with a grin. "Miss Clara." They bloomed early this year. I leaned down, touching one of the soft pink petals. "Daniel always said they would when they were cared for right." She smiled. "Well, they're thriving now, just like you," I chuckled. Maybe we both just needed new soil. As I stood there, the scent of those roses brought back everything, the laughter, the heartbreak, the courage it took to walk away. But instead of pain, I felt peace. The house was no longer mine, but the story, the love, the lessons, the legacy, that was something no one could ever take. On my way home, I stopped by the cemetery. The air was cool, the grass freshly trimmed. Daniel's headstone gleamed softly in the afternoon sun. I knelt down, brushing a few leaves from the stone. "Hey, love," I whispered. "It's done. Everything you built is safe, and so am I." I placed a single white rose beside his name. "You'd be proud of Jasmine. She's learning. Took her a while, but she's getting there." The wind stirred lightly, carrying the faintest scent of rain. "I miss you," I said softly. "But I finally understand what you meant when you said strength isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go." I smiled, standing slowly, feeling lighter than I had in years. And I've let go, Daniel. I've really let go. That night I came home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The city lights flickered below like tiny lanterns, each one a reminder that life keeps burning even after the darkest nights. I opened my journal, the same one where I'd written my plan months ago, and turned to the last blank page. I wrote, "They thought my silence meant surrender, but silence was my strategy. They thought my leaving meant loss, but leaving was how I found myself. I am not what they took. I am what I kept, my dignity, my peace, my name." I closed the book, feeling that rare and sacred kind of calm, the one that doesn't come from revenge or victory, but from the satisfaction of knowing you did right by your soul. And if I could say one thing to the women who find this story one day, maybe watching it, listening to it, or reading it somewhere down the line, it would be this: you are not too old to start again, you are not too kind to fight back, and you are never too broken to rebuild. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire or fury, it's serenity. It's walking away so gracefully that people have to turn around just to see what strength looks like. As I turned off the lamp that night, I caught my reflection in the window, older, wiser, softer. The lines on my face weren't just age. They were proof that I lived, that I loved, that I learned, and maybe that's the truest kind of wealth there is.